Hey, how's your shoulder? Yeah, getting better? Yeah. Let's talk about it.
John, how are you?
I'm good, fine. Hey,
Good to see you.
I see you.
Hey, Doc, you doing
Good to see you. Hey, Fred, how are you? It's 2 o'clock. I want to welcome everyone to the July 20th, 2016 meeting of the Agency Operations Committee and remind everyone that this meeting is being broadcast live via the internet. I also want to welcome Ms. Haley De La Garza, our newly appointed student representative. Haley is pursuing her Doctor of Nursing Practice in Anesthesia from UT Health Science Center at Houston. She will serve as an ex officio member of this committee, and I gave her a little bit of a warning, but Haley, would you like to say a few words?
Thank you very much for the welcome. I very much look forward to the work that we're doing here on this committee, and I'm really honored to be a part of it. And I look forward to impacting education in Texas.
All right, the first agenda item is approval of the minutes from the April 27th Agency Operations Committee meeting. Do I have a motion? Okay, we have a motion by Dr. Tischer and second Mr. Raven. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. The next item is public testimony. Ms. Battles. Okay, Ms. Battles is telling we have not received any request for public testimony, so we'll move on to the next item. The first item under agency operations is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the agency's legislative appropriation request for fiscal years 2018 and 2019. Linda Battles, Deputy Commissioner for Agency Operations and Communications / Chief Operating Officer, will present this item to the committee. Ms. Battles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, members. Every 2 years, state agencies and institutions of higher education are required to submit baseline spending requests for general revenue and general revenue dedicated funds. For the last several biennia, agencies have been also required to submit plans showing potential spending cuts of 10% in 2 5% increments. This year, we were instructed to submit baseline spending requests that were no greater than 96% of the funds that were expended in fiscal year 2016 and budgeted for the current fiscal year 2017. Fiscal year 2017. We were also allowed to request additional funding levels known as an exceptional item request, but we are required to identify lower priority programs and cost savings that could offset these additional funding requests. Today, I'll be going over our legislative appropriations request, or as we refer to it, our LAR, for the 2018-19 biennium. I'll discuss the programs that we're recommending, either 100% elimination or significant reduction in order to meet our 4% cut. I'll briefly describe our two 5% reduction scenarios and discuss our recommendations for our exceptional item request, as well as how we can offset some of these costs. So I'll be going through a few slides first, and then I'll walk you through the 11 by 14 spreadsheet that you have at your places. And I will also be referring to this letter, colorful, 2 tables. And these materials are online in case the audience would like to follow along. But in case they can't access our website at this point, my slides, I think, will be very helpful in helping them follow along. Here is an overview of the LAR timeline. As you can see, it was a very compressed timeline. In anticipation of having a short turnaround time to develop our LAR from the time the instructions were issued to the time that we had to bring this to you for consideration and adoption, our CFO, Ken Martin, started organizing staff to begin our deliberations in late May and June and start working on the LAR. While we didn't know at the time that we would be directed to cut our baseline funding by 4%, we anticipated being asked for the 2-5% reduction scenarios. So that's where we started our deliberations. Additionally, I think it's important to note that late last year, the commissioner began hearing from key legislators that it would be a tight budget session. There was also talk about the possibility of agencies having to go through zero-based budgeting. You may also recall that in February, when you were considering formula funding recommendations for higher education institutions, the commissioner directed staff to recommend funding levels that take into account growth, inflation, and what is truly needed in order to achieve the goals of 60 by 30 techs. He wanted to be able to justify our recommendations to the legislature, knowing that it would be a tight budget session. Ultimately, you recommended percentage increases for each sector that were lower than what the Formula Advisory Committees recommended. And we stand by those recommendations today. We will advocate on behalf of the institutions. The levels that we recommended should be the starting point of discussions next session. Again, it's because it's what our institutions need if the state is committed to achieving the goals of 60 by 30 techs. On July 1st, we received the budget policy letter from the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker directing state agencies and institutions of higher education to apply the 4% cut to our baseline appropriations request. That was on the Friday before the 4th of July holiday, so the staff met the following week to start deliberating for several hours on how to come up with the cuts. And on July 8th, we met for several hours with the commissioner, who approved the staff recommendations after making some key critical changes. The following week, we met with staff from the offices of the governor, lieutenant governor, speaker, budget committees, and several other legislative offices, as well as the governmental relations staff from the institutions. I also reached out to the Texas Association of Community Colleges and the Independent Colleges and Universities of Texas. We did all of this in order to provide our stakeholders with an opportunity to review our recommendations in advance of this meeting so that they can understand our rationale for our recommendations and give them a chance to express their concerns to you prior to adopting the LAR. Finally, we also met with Chairman Jenkins, Vice Chairman Stedman, and Agency Operations Committee Chairman Steen, who provided valuable feedback to us that led us to make additional adjustments to our recommendations, as well as how we presented the information. So thank you very much for your guidance. Here are the components of our LAR. You received all of these materials late Monday evening. I apologize for the lateness in getting you the materials. I have to thank the staff for working so hard and long hours and pulling all this together. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to focus on the first 4 bullets, but if you have any questions about the administrator's statement or writer revisions, I'm happy to address those. We're still working on some of the messaging and some of the language and supporting materials before we actually submit on August 5th, but it will not make any substantive changes to what you adopt today and tomorrow. So before we move on to the spreadsheet, I want to explain how we made the decisions about how we went about making the decisions for the cuts. Here are the commissioner's guiding principles for developing our LAR. And for those of you who have been on the board for a while, you know that the first 2 principles are not new. Since the commissioner joined the agency in 2004, he's been consistent about not applying any mandated cuts across the board. He has consistently directed us to evaluate each and every program that we administer and has always said he does not want to ask the legislature for more money for programs that don't produce good results. And he doesn't want to ask for more money for programs without proposing changes to programs that help yield better results. In addition, we have such a complex budget structure with nearly $1.5 billion in state funding. Doesn't include all the other funds, the federal funds and other funds. And these dollars go to support faculty, students, healthcare providers, and a number of other stakeholders. So every one of our programs in our budget has a legislator who has championed that program, who has worked hard to create the program and maintain funding for that program. So we are sensitive to the political environment in which these cuts will be going forward, and we are prepared to justify our recommendations. But the fact of the matter is, we've been directed to provide these recommendations to the governor and to the legislature, and we want to make sure that they understand that we think we did our most diligent work in evaluating each of these programs, and hopefully we'll provide them with some guidance about where to fund the state's limited dollars on behalf of the taxpayers. I'm sorry. And the last bullet is different from what we have ever done in the past in terms of the Commissioner's guiding principles. The Commissioner agrees that we need to protect our administrative funding from cuts in order to effectively and efficiently carry out our mission, achieve our goals, and perform our key functions. This is consistent with our agency strategic plan, where we stated that we need the resources to recruit and retain high-quality staff to effectively carry out our mission and key functions, and to provide the technological infrastructure to increase our efficiencies and to protect the confidentiality of our student data. Currently, out of the $1.8 billion biannual budget of our all funds budget, less than 2% of state appropriations goes to support our operations. At our highest FTE cap, we were at 310.9 in 2010. We are now at 265.4 authorized FTE. We are actually at 230 to 235 employees working in this agency today due to attrition and hiring lags. But we've been able to do more with less by implementing efficiencies. We're getting to a point, though, where we're concerned that we cannot do our jobs effectively if we don't have the sufficient administrative resources. You will see this reflected in how we applied the 4% cuts and in our exceptional items requests that we are proposing. So at this point, I want to move on to the spreadsheet, and this slide here will provide the key highlights that I'll be going over specific to our 4% reductions. So if you can turn to the spreadsheet, I'm going to walk you through the layout and mention some key points. So one of the key points to note is that the funding here on the spreadsheet is general revenue and general revenue dedicated only. And it excludes, if you look at the first column, that is the list of the programs that have general revenue and general revenue dedicated. So this does not, it's not a comprehensive list of all of our budget strategies. We do not have our federal funding strategies. We do not have other programs that are funded through other funds on this list. And also important to note that the FY 18-19 base of $1.485 billion is an estimate. To this date, we have not received our official base reconciliation from the LBB. So we have made estimates, our best guess estimate here on what to include in our base. So we removed one-time funding that we received in the current biennium, such as the funding that we received for implementing the centralized accounting payroll personnel system that was to get us going on the comptroller's system this biennium. That's not included in the base. We also received $250 million to allocate to the institutions for tuition revenue bond debt service. That is not in the base. Baylor College of Medicine is also not included here because the legislature treats them the way that they treat the other public health-related institutions. So we did not include them in the base as well. This is important because I'll get to the reason why in a minute when I start to talk about some of the 4% cuts. We did make some minor corrections. For example, we had included by accident T-STEM funds, which are not general revenue or general revenue, so we pulled those out of the base for academic quality and workforce. And we also moved funding from autism program. We get about $300,000 for the biennium in administrative funds for that program. And we had originally had it under academic quality and workforce, and we moved all that funding into the program strategy for autism. This is going to make, it's corrected here, but it's going to make a difference when I talk about our exceptional items request. So what I want to go ahead and do now is start going down where we applied the cuts and why. So if you look at, well, I should probably finish walking you through the spreadsheet. So I'm going to be covering the blue shaded area where it has the 4% reduction to the base. It's broken down by GR dedicated, and total. And then you have an adjusted base after we apply the cuts, so that'll be the new base. And then later on, I'll get into the first 5% reduction scenario, which is off of the adjusted base after the 4% cuts, and then the second 5% reduction scenario. The 4% base reduction column to your right shows you the percentage cut per program that we're recommending. And then the final column is the priority rankings for the 10% cuts. And I'll get to those later.
Linda, do you mind just, I'm not sure everybody understands the difference between GR and GR dedicated.
Sure. So general revenue is the state funding. General revenue dedicated are funds that are collected and appropriated for a specific purpose. Does that help? They're both state funds. Okay. I am going to describe the first 8 programs you will see that
Ms.
are
Battles,
listed.
on the spreadsheet, where's the priority ranking on there?
The priority ranking applies to our 2 5% cuts. We were not asked to prioritize the cuts to the 4% since that is a hard cut. So the ranking is applying to the 2 5% cuts, and they are in order of what we want to preserve first as being at the bottom. Oh, I know what you're asking. The numbers are not there.
Oh, it's something.
So, thank you. I just, we're missing a column that has the rankings, so I will have to.
So Linda, here's the question. I'm assuming that the 4% reduction will be all included in the 5% reduction, and that the other 1% is coming out in the rank order from mental health loan repayment program down to innovations and policy development. Are those in rank order as to priorities?
They are in rank order. The 0% cuts are not ranked. So the ranking is between on that final column, the 100% for mental health, all the way down to Texas grants at 7.75%.
So I guess in the salmon color that says first 5% reduction scenario, that would involve everything that's in the 100% reduction scenario under the blue 4%, would it not?
No, those go away in the 4% cut.
Correct, but when we elected to have the agency look at a 5 and a 10% projection, everything in the 4% that gets a 100% cut would be included in the 5%.
No, because all the funds are gone, they're not available for the 5%.
So you're looking at a 9% cut, 4 plus 5.
We're looking at a 4% hard cut and then 2 5% cuts in two separate increments.
Okay.
So we're taking it
that's
off
why-
of the-
That's why it's hard to read this, because
I apologize.
I thought you were saying a 4% cut, and we were doing this mental exercise on the 5 and the 10. We started that before we were instructed to come up with a 4%.
Right, and we're still required to submit those two 5%.
Okay. So really, when you said 5% reduction would be a 9% reduction.
Yes.
And then ultimately, the second 5 would be a 14% reduction.
Right.
Okay, that helps.
Great. Sorry for the confusion. Okay, so just to clarify on the rankings then, they begin with the 100% on that salmon-colored column, all the way down to the 7.75%. So the way that you can see this is the first, if we had to take a 10% cut, the first to go would be the mental health loan repayment program. The last cut to be applied would be to Texas grants.
That's just the last column on the spreadsheet we're looking at.
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, so what I'm going to do now is spend some time talking about the 8 programs that we are recommending 100% elimination under the 4% cut. So you see on this slide for the audience, they are listed there under the second bullet. The Border County Doctoral Faculty Education Loan Repayment Program is to recruit and retain faculty with doctoral degrees to become or remain full-time teaching faculty at Texas institutions of higher education that border the Mexico border. Each institution submits to the coordinating board at least 4 applications from selected members of the faculty who may receive loan repayments for up to $5,000 for each year of service for a maximum of 10 years. The program has been fully subscribed every year since it was created. However, the justification for our recommendation for elimination is that the program does not directly align with our mission and with our 60 by 30 text goals. The next one is the Centers for Teacher Education. In 1995, the legislature created this to support teacher education at 5 historically black private universities, which are Houston-Tillotson, Jarvis Christian College, Paul Quinn College, Texas College, and Wiley College. And the purpose of the program is to recruit and prepare, retain, and place highly qualified and fully certified students in the teaching profession. And they do this through scholarships as well as program enhancements. Each institution receives approximately $300,000 per year from this program. They use about half of this money for scholarships and the other half for program enhancements. Our justification for this recommendation is generally that when you look at the results and the cost for this program, generally speaking, a certified teacher at these institutions costs more to produce than a student, say, at a public historically black college like Texas Southern or Prairie View. We can also, we also look to the completion rates and certification exam passage rates, and while they have improved over time, they are not compelling at this point in time that we are asking, the state is asking us to make cuts and make these difficult decisions. The Dental Education Loan Repayment Program was established in 1999 by the legislature to encourage qualified dentists to provide services in areas of the state that are underserved with respect to dental care. Currently, there are 8 applicants who are being served by this program. They receive $13,750 if they all successfully complete their service period, which ends in March. The program was unfunded in 2011, and the funding reappeared in our budget last session. So again, our justification for elimination is that the program does not necessarily align with our mission or 60 by 30 text goals, and since it's been unfunded until just recently, these individuals have not come to depend on this funding. The Educational Aid Program provides tuition and fee exemptions for educational aides who enroll in college to become certified Texas teachers. Again, here's another program that was unfunded in 2011, and funding appeared in our budget last session. It's $1.5 million. Our justification is that the program doesn't necessarily directly align with our mission and our 60 by 30 text goals. And again, since it had been unfunded until recently, recipients haven't become dependent on the funds. The engineering recruitment program funds 1-week summer program experiences for middle and high school students to engage and encourage them to consider engineering as a profession. 22 institutions are participating this summer with an expected 900 students involved. Again, we fall back to what our specific goals are, our immediate goals with respect to 60 by 30 text, and it's such a small funded program. The preceptorship program provides funding to medical school students to encourage them to choose primary care careers by offering an on-site experience in one of 3 primary care specialties: family practice, internal medicine, and pediatrics. This experience is typically during the summer between the student's first and second year of medical school, and they basically work in a physician's office and experience the daily life of physicians to determine, whether they want to go into that field. Currently, there are 350 students participating in the program, and again, looking at our 60 by 30 text goals, the fact that this program was unfunded since 2011, another example that just got funded again this past session. Not a lot of dependence on it, so we made the tough decision to do that. Through the Primary Care Innovation Program, Texas medical schools are provided funds to develop innovative methods to encourage students to consider and pursue primary care. Innovations include partnerships of medical schools to conduct coordinated outreach to ensure that residency programs know which students may be interested in primary care, and streamlining medical school curricula to allow students to rapidly move through their education and training. Very similar rationalization for recommending the cuts to this program that I've cited. The Texas Teacher Residency Program provides funding to teaching residents to participate in a master's degree program that leads to teacher certification. Texas A&M University Commerce, in collaboration with the University of Texas at Tyler, has formed partnerships with Dallas, Texas Residency and local ISDs to provide employment to residents in the program. This is a program that seems to be very good in what it does, but it is a difficult one to scale because of the cost involved. Currently, the program only serves 30 students. So those are the 8 programs that we recommended 100% elimination. The next programs that have the highest percentage cut include the top 10% scholarship, the mental health loan repayment at 50%, and Texas Armed Services scholarships. I'll go over each of those. The top 10% scholarship, this is where I was talking about the base reconciliation and why it's important with respect to these cuts. If you look at the base amount, it's currently $18.2 million. And in the current biennium, that's base level funding that we received for the current biennium. We were overfunded because the legislature decided that it wanted to only fund renewal students. So it wanted to phase out the program because the program had, which is for providing scholarships to students who graduate in the top 10% of their high school graduating class, was meant to provide them with $2,000 awards. And the funding that the legislature had appropriated over time had declined, and the award amount was down to $600. So we made the recommendation last session during our strategic fiscal review that either the legislature fully fund the program so that students have the maximum award amount to encourage them, the whole purpose was to encourage them to stay in Texas, or not fund the program. And so the legislature decided to prioritize the financial aid programs and decided to phase out this program. So,
Can I ask a question on that?
yes,
So the amount, I mean, obviously, if we eliminated 100%, then those who are already receiving those would not finish out.
Right.
So this is really just to finish out those who have already been awarded.
the 15 million cut that we're recommending would not impact anybody because we are, based on our estimates on those renewal students for 18-19 is going to drop.
Right.
And so what's we left in the strategy after the cut will go towards those that we are estimating will come back for renewal.
So this is only to cover the renewals, not award any new grants.
Right. We're not allowed to
So
award
the
any
reason that we
grants.
can't go to 100%, or it was not recommended, is it would cut out the renewals.
Correct.
Right, and so this isn't a value proposition for us, as it was with the legislature. For what's for us left is a math problem,
Right.
as far as what we have to do to fulfill.
Right.
So there's
right.
no real value analysis on our part.
Well, right. So I do want to say that the Legislative Budget Board is going to have to decide whether they apply the cuts before they give us our base reconciliation, or they're going to leave the base as is to allow us to apply the cuts here. So 15, if they decide when they come back with our base reconciliation to cut us in the base, we're going to have to make up that 15 million elsewhere.
So when do we expect to get the base reconciliation?
We've been asking that question every day.
Right.
We don't know. But obviously, our deadline to submit is August 5th. So we need to get it sometime before then. Hopefully, we get it this week. We made the offices aware that you had your board meeting this week and would be making decisions. So what we were going to do was ask the board tomorrow to approve the recommendation based as you see it today and tomorrow, if we don't get the base reconciliation between now and tomorrow. And if we do get a different base that's substantially different from what you're seeing here, and we have to apply cuts, we would ask that you defer approval to the board chair, vice chair, and Agency Operations Committee Chair on behalf of the board.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Battles, does this take into account the school that does 7% as far as admissions?
UT Austin?
Yes,
Yes.
specifically. So the numbers are reflecting all that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Just to point out, will make a big difference, because that's, the 15 million is,
Well, it
we're trying to
really-
cut 60 million, so it's 25%.
That 15 million helped us with the programs listed there that don't have cuts. So Texas Educational Opportunity Grant for the need-based program for two-year colleges, the Texas Research Incentive Program, which is a great program for our 8 emerging research institutions, which is working. And, we have about an $88 million backlog because the institutions are really raising those matching funds. And so the commissioner, that was one of his recommended changes. He wanted to protect TRIP. So that would be one place where we may have to reconsider if the LBB comes back and says, find the 15 million elsewhere. So, again, tough choices, not easy. This was not dealt with lightly. Moving on, if there aren't any more questions, I'll move on to mental health loan repayment program, which we're recommending a 50% cut. This program, along with the autism program, we had originally thought could come under the list of exemptions that the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker had included in their policy letter in which they directed us to apply 4% cuts to our base. They had behavioral health programs listed as exempted programs from the cut. So we had to ask clarification from the LBB whether this mental health loan repayment program and our autism program qualified for that exemption. we ultimately, after we went through this whole process at the staff level, we ultimately received official word from the LBB that they were not exempted. But we had gone through the process, so we cut it at 50%, but we also, later you will see that we do recommend that if we need to offset our exceptional item request, that this program be one that we eliminate entirely. And it is eliminated entirely when we get to the 10% cut. Again, it's a new program that was just created last session, and it doesn't necessarily align with our mission and our 60 by 30 text goals. The Texas Armed Services Scholarship, its purpose is to encourage students to become members of the Texas Army or Air National Guard, the Texas State Guard, the U.S. Coast Guard, the U.S. Merchant Marine, or to become commissioned officers in any branch of the armed services of the U.S. Annually, the governor and the lieutenant governor may each appoint 2 students, and each state senator and state representative may appoint 1 student to receive a conditional TASP award. I should say that it's a conditional award. It's not necessarily a scholarship, as the name implies, because it's really an award that the students have to pay if they don't fulfill the commitments of the award. So some of the reasons for our justification for recommending the 50% cut, and later, again, you will see we are recommending a 100% cut in the 5% reductions, as well as a suggestion for offsetting our exceptional item requests. There are a number of reasons. First, the program has been undersubscribed since its creation in 2010. And one reason is because less than 70% of legislators actually make a nomination. On average, we have 126 nominations out of a potential 185. It, again, does not directly align with our mission and our 60 by 30 text goals. It is not need-based. It mainly benefits one institution, where 74% of the awardees are A&M students. It's not a scholarship program, as I mentioned earlier. It's really a loan program with a forgiveness option, which means that students could take on additional debt if they don't fulfill the obligations of the award. From an administrative perspective, it's inefficient to administer. Generally speaking, it takes students 4 to 6 years to complete their program at the undergraduate level, plus an additional 4 to 6 years to serve in the military, which means that forgiveness conditions have to be tracked each year for 8 to 12 years. And even if the participants go into repayment at any point during this time, that award becomes a loan. And then we add 10 more years of loan servicing from that point on. The 3-year default rate for these loans in repayment is 17% for the 2013 cohort. This is higher than the 2012 federal 3-year default rate of 11.8%. Since 2010, 104 loans are in repayment and current on their account, but 45 loans that are in repayment are late on their account.
I don't understand. I mean, what is the basis for your assessment that is inefficient? It seems like to me that based upon the way it's set up, that's just the nature of their service.
The inefficiency is in the way that the program is set up. So you give a student money up front, but they have to fulfill all these duties on the back end. And if they don't fulfill those duties, you have to track them down to get the money back from them. And so in 2003, I'll give you an example. We had a number of these loan forgiveness programs that we administered that did the same concept, that administered the programs in the same way. We had a lot of countless staff time and effort trying to track down people who hadn't fulfilled their commitments and trying to collect back the money because they didn't fulfill their obligations. So in 2003, the Sunset Commission, when we were going through our review, recommended that all of our loan forgiveness programs be converted into loan repayment programs, so that you basically tell the student, this is what you need to do, and we will repay whatever loans you took out to fund your education. So that's the Teach for Texas loan repayment program. That's how that works. So once they go into a teaching field that is underserved, or an area that has a critical shortage of certified teachers, and they go and they agree to teach for 5 years, we're repaying their loans.
Okay, I get that part, but I guess my question still remains. It seems like to me that is the structure of the program that's the problem, and not necessarily the participants who have created an issue that is inefficient.
With the participants, I think, we're at a time where there isn't a huge demand for recruiting in the military. So for the participants, we've heard stories where it's been difficult for them to do that. So they're going into the workforce instead of going into the military, because there's not that demand, that recruiting demand. And so now they're having to repay the loan because they're not fulfilling the commitment. So again, overall, the whole purpose of the program doesn't align with what we're trying to achieve with 60 by 30 techs. I know it's a program that is highly valued by many. Our former board member, Neil Adams, this is his program. And he does everything that he can to advocate for additional funding. He's been very successful in getting that funding from the legislature since it was created. But again, we're having to make these tough decisions.
But it seems to me that the two salient points are, one, that it's undersubscribed. So right there, we have a gap of what we've got it funded at. And then my question would be, of what you said, that receive the award that don't go into the military. What percent of those that are recipients don't indeed go into the military, which is what they were thinking they were going to do when they received the award?
So the stat that I have, and I may need to call up staff to help me if they have the information, the stat that I have available to me right now is that since 2010, 104 loans are in repayment. So those presumably did not meet the requirements, and now they're having to repay. And I do have some additional information here.
And while she's looking for that, Mr. Chairman, are we going to be reviewing this as a whole package, or do you want us to, kind of like Mr. Raven did, present some questions to Ms. Battles about specific items we may have concerns about?
Well, did you hear the question that?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Well, he's asking about the procedure and asking questions, but, so I've got the responsibility of keeping the meeting moving, and so I noticed that as we set this up, in order to adjourn at 5:30, we're supposed to get we're supposed to be through with this I believe, at 2:45. So, Ms. Battles, you're going to have to help me with
Okay.
this. And this is important, so, but we've got other things
Right.
later on the agenda that are also important.
One option I can offer is we can get the data that you've just asked for. We can postpone a board committee vote until tomorrow to
Oh, no,
get you
no.
comfortable.
No,
so we
not
can
on this
move on?
particular point, but I'm just bringing up generally that we should be coming to a vote on this according to the schedule on the
Yes.
agenda, so.
Yes.
And we're just getting into this, right? And there's a lot to go.
There is a lot more to go. I hadn't planned on spending a whole lot of time on the 5% cuts because the rationalization really carries forward.
Yeah,
So I
okay.
just really wanted to move
Well,
on to our
and when you and I
items.
talked, I mean, I'm responsible for this too, because I thought if we're talking about eliminating programs, you needed at least for the record to describe what the program is, rather than just kind of rush through it.
Correct.
It's taking time.
I can certainly, we can quickly answer the question that was asked and move forward and breeze through, and hopefully we can get this done.
On the Armed Services Scholarship Program, it started in 2010, and it started with about $1 million, and then it went up to almost $5 million in the biennium. The cohorts there, when you really look at it, they have either 4 to 6 years. They have 150 credit hours to complete school. So we really don't have good data yet on a solid cohort on completion. But we do have the data as far as the quantity of individuals that are currently in repayment, which means they probably during school have exited the program. We had 104, and I believe it was 45 that were late. So approximately 149 at this point are making payments on loans that were originated either between 2010 and 2015. We originate new students, new awardees, around 120 to 126 out of 185 that would be eligible if all legislators made the recommendations.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I don't think my question was answered, though, and so my question was, and I think Linda was doing some work there, my question is, are we going to review all this as one package because we have to vote on it as a committee to recommend to the board?
Yes.
Tomorrow. So if we have concerns about a specific topic, are you going to ask us, which I do, on one particular item? I'd like a little bit more detail. I'd like to support things, but maybe I have an opinion to make on the record on one particular item. Is this the time to do that?
That would be fine, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. I'd like a little bit more detail on the very first topic, the Border Faculty Loan Prepayment Program.
Yes.
And since it was actually, doctorate programs from 1994 on, and that is being fully used, right? That the legislature approved, right? Okay, so what is again, I know you mentioned once quickly, what was the rationale for that? Because my point, I want to listen to you again, and then I'll bring up some points.
Well, it's to support faculty, and if you look at our 60 by 30 text goals, we're focused on the students. And I understand, you can make the argument that if you have a diverse faculty that's Hispanic faculty working in border institutions, they can help students. There's an argument to be made that they can be good role models and mentors.
Yeah, because
to
obviously
students.
it's very hard for presidents of universities on the border to recruit doctorate level professors and instructors at the doctorate level. So in order to meet our 60 by 30, you want to be able to have students be able to go to the best professors and have those colleges and universities be able to recruit. And I think the program, it's the second of the 8 programs being cut 100%. It's the second lowest.
Okay.
And I know we've got to make tough decisions.
Right.
But I think one of our big mottos for our board, coordinating board in the state of Texas, is also quality. And I think we need to consider that as well. So when you only have 375,000, the second lowest cut. So I don't think that it's really going against our new model. I just think that it would actually have more opportunities for the universities and faculty searches to get the best and the brightest to continue. There's a maximum, only 5,000, and only 4 get it. So I don't know if that sends the right message, but that's my opinion.
I think you could argue with all of these cuts that they somehow fit, but it's sort of splitting hairs at this point because we have to find the money from somewhere. So
I understand. It's a
we kind
challenge.
of get to a point where, okay, do we want to fund students with Texas grants and Texas Educational Opportunity grants, or do we want to fund doctoral candidates to encourage them to work at border institutions? Those are sort of the dilemma that we're having these decisions that we're having to make. And so using the commissioner's guiding principles, that's really helped us try to hone in on what are the most important programs that are going to help us achieve our goals and are going to have the biggest impact.
I understand.
And so forth. So
But
this is a decision for the board to make. We've made the recommendations, but it's really up to the board and
Well, no, the
where you
reason
want to place
is,
your
I mean, I just
priorities.
wanted, Chairman, if it's possible to vote, but also make a note in the record if there's a particular item that I would disagree with.
Ms. Battles, back to my question about our timing on this. What do you think? Can we get, any possibility we could
Let me
come to a
finish,
vote by
and
3 o'clock?
I think I can finish no later than 2. Is that okay? And if you want me to come in late, I'll,
Finish by 2, I'll take it.
I'm sorry, 3. 3.
No, that'd be.
Okay.
I think we can make it up if.
Okay, great. We're going to move on to our exceptional items request. So that's this sheet here. Okay, so we have 5, there's 2 that are broken up into 2 subcategories, but the budget strategy is the one that's bolded on this slide. So you'll see they are in order of priority. Does everybody have this?
Are we looking at this sheet?
Yes.
Which is clipped to the back of the big spreadsheet?
Yes, yes. And I've got the slide up for the audience here. So we've got information resources as our number 1 exceptional item request. I want to thank Mr. Steen for suggesting that if we really need to improve our security upgrades for protecting student data here, then we need to make that as our number 1 priority. And so this is very unique from how we've done things in the past. We've always put student financial aid as our number 1 priority, but we are really trying to emphasize that this is an important thing. We have, as Dr. Gardner points out, 1.6 million student records that we maintain here at the coordinating board in our database every semester, and this goes back for decades. We need to protect the integrity of that data. And so we wanted to highly prioritize the funding that's needed to completely implement all of our security recommendations that Gartner issued to us in FY14. So it's broken down there by protecting confidentiality of data and then information security and professional services. I don't want to go into too much detail because we're pressed for time. So moving on to Texas grants, we've got $78.3 million request. This is to maintain the level of coverage that we are serving 85% of eligible students in the program at a $5,000 award amount. We, in conjunction with this request, have made legislative recommendations that would limit the award amount to tuition fees, books, minus Pell Grant in order to leverage federal dollars and to serve students who have higher expected family contribution amounts that still have financial need but don't qualify for Pell or have the need, are the neediest of students. And so this will help us also provide summer awards to students to encourage them to go year-round and complete in a more timely fashion. Advise Texas is our program that used to be funded through federal funds. Those federal funds went away. It employs recent university graduates to serve in high schools that have low college going rates to provide them with information about going to college and how to pay for college. And so we're looking at trying to serve 80 to 100 more advisors and be in 210 public schools across the state. Academic Quality and Workforce is our administrative strategy for Rex Peoples Division. We want to receive some funding to help improve transfer by creating 8 additional fields of study. The problem with student transfer from 2-year institutions to 4-year institutions is not that the courses don't transfer, but they just don't apply to the student's major. So we would develop these fields of study over the next biennium and focus on those high-demand programs. We also need to increase our oversight for for-profit institutions, but we need the resources to do that. And we also want to create came up with 50%. That's all I have. It's 3 o'clock.
She did well.
So we're going to be taking a vote as a committee to approve this, and then it's on the agenda for tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
And we'll if somebody here has on further reflection or reviewing these materials have some questions about it, they could also ask them tomorrow?
Yes, sir. I will be here tomorrow to cover any questions that you may have that.
Because this is very important. It's just that we've got so much on the agenda. But I think Dr. Tischer has a couple of questions.
Yeah, two quick questions. On your large spreadsheet, the very last item, innovation and policy development, it indicates under the 4% reduction of base, no cuts, and yet there's nothing under the adjusted base. Is that just a typo? Why isn't 524,000 under the adjusted base?
Mr. Martin, you're nodding your head. Come up if you've got an answer.
That is correct. That's just a typo. That would carry over, the full amount.
So should the 1.425 be actually 1.436?
That is correct.
Okay, so I guess before tomorrow, maybe we need to correct that, if you don't mind. And then on this last item that you had us go through, the EIR offset, number 7, JAMP.
Yes.
I know at least once, if not twice, in the last 2 biennium, we have unanimously recommended complete elimination of that program. It has low subscribership, low results. Why don't we offer the entire program? Why are we cutting a bad program?
I don't think we've recommended 100% elimination, but we've talked about reductions, and we actually took into account your feedback a couple of sessions ago about when we were trying to make decisions about whether we should put more money into GME versus JAMP, because it's important to have the residency slots available for those students once they get through. And so we took that into account when we applied the cuts. But I'm not recollecting.
We recommend at least once in the last 2 biennium a complete elimination of the JAMP program. Certain individuals in legislature, that was a pet project of theirs, and it showed back up.
Yes, it was Senator West.
Yes.
And that's where it got the infusion of funds, because we had made a recommendation about the reduction. I'd have to go back and double check to make sure it was 100% reduction or it was a significant cut. But he was not happy about that, and so he was able to secure even more funding for the program.
Okay. I'm just concerned the criteria we used, and I think you've laid this out very well, was it's low subscribership, low yield, and it doesn't meet our 60 by TX goals. So it goes bing, bing, bing. It hits all 3. That's a strikeout.
We'll take a look at the subscribership, because my understanding is it is fully subscribed. So I'll double check on that for tomorrow.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move that we accept the recommendations and forward those to the board.
Okay, I have a motion by Dr. Tischer. Is there a second? Welcome, Ms. Shepherd. Okay, by Mr. Stedman. Any discussion? All in favor? Oh, go ahead.
Just a question. So Linda, the plan for tomorrow is, are we going to go through somewhat similar of this exercise tomorrow or not?
No, I hadn't planned on it, although Ms. Shepherd missed most of it, and I apologize, but I can certainly meet.
That was one of the things I was wanting to make sure that we had
It's really up to Ms. Shepherd and what her preference is.
Then, Mr. Chairman, could I ask one more question before we, not that I get to vote on this, but before we go? Linda, would you just take 1 minute, 2 minutes on the financial aid programs? When we look at those, could we address the differences in those cuts and a little bit of the rationale and the thinking behind that?
Thank you so
We've-
much. In my haste to try and complete the process, I didn't mention the tuition equalization grant. And we sent a letter to you, and you should have a copy of it at your places. The independent colleges and University of Texas strongly oppose our proposed 5.72% cut in the 4% cut. And they list their arguments there, and I can tell you the rationalization that we used for applying that is one, and I can tell you that ICUT will say that they really prefer that we treat TEG the way that we treat Texas grants. But they're two separate programs. I'm not going to go into detail how they're different, but they are. And so when we were looking at this, we knew that our public institutions were going to have to take a 4% cut in their base. And we didn't want to add to those cuts by further cutting their grant programs. So that's why we protected the Texas Educational Opportunity Grant at 0 cuts. And for Texas grants, we minimized the cuts at 0.33% cut. For TEG, we applied a 5.72% cut. So that's the 4% cut that institutions are having to handle, as well as an additional 1.72% to make up the overall 4%
So
cut.
it's important to point out that another factor is that we keep hearing that tuition set-asides are at risk, that they might be eliminated. And if that occurs, that's going to significantly reduce the amount of money that institutions have for financial aid for their neediest students. So that was another reason that we wanted to protect the Texas grant program in case that occurs. So we had to cut, and so we determined it should be TEG. We would like to protect all our programs, but I think it's fair to say that our first responsibility is to public institutions, particularly since all of our financial aid programs in public institutions are based primarily on need.
And I do have, I know that Ray Martinez, who is the president of ICUT, is in the audience. If you had any questions, he said he'd be happy to come up.
We have a motion and a second. And Dr. Frias, did you want to make your statement now, or do you want to make it tomorrow? Or?
Well, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr. Raven.
Well, I mean, I was going to ask that we could possibly have overnight to look at this. I mean, we just got this information tonight. It seems to me that, I don't know what Mr. Farias has to questions he might have or other board members might have, but it seems to me that it's a bit premature to recommend some things that, I mean, some of these cuts seem to be significant, and I'm not sure that I understand the basis for the cuts.
And that, my point exactly. I mean, I understand, first of all, a great report, Ms. Battles. I know it's that you and the staff have worked overtime because of the time constraints you've had, and the commissioner as well, so you've had to make a lot of tough decisions. That one program still concerns me, but I agree with everything else. But as Mr. Raven says, there are some concerns that I have, but I've already addressed them. But I don't have a problem supporting the motion. I just would add that there's one particular line item that I would not agree with.
Well, just to emphasize again, Mr. Raven, this is a committee vote, so we're
Decisions tomorrow.
The final decision would be tomorrow, so there'd be an opportunity there for you this evening to, is that? to study
I
it
mean, I
further?
follow that. I mean, Mr. Chairman, I clearly understand that. I guess I tend to put some emphasis on the importance of a recommendation from a committee to the full board. And it seems to me that if we're going to suggest to the full board that we're comfortable with all of this, that we first ought to properly vet everybody's concerns before we make that kind of recommendation. I mean, that's my only concern.
Well, but it falls on me to keep this meeting
I
moving.
understand.
And we're already well beyond the allotted time for this. It's difficult because these are all very important issues. And
So what I would suggest and offer, because I concur and understand completely, is that when this agenda item is tomorrow, Linda, that we be available for additional questions before the full board makes their vote so that we can address any additional ones that might come up.
That's fair enough.
Is that all
That's
right?
fair with me.
For at least to kind of move this, and then still, at that point, we're not going to make a decision until we're all as comfortable as we can be.
Very good. That's good enough. Thank you.
all right, we ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, let's move to the next item on the agenda. Under agency operations is a report on major IT projects in progress. Sydney Hogston, Assistant Commissioner for Information Solutions and Services, will present this item, which does not require any action. And you're you're allotted 5 minutes. Is that enough?
5 minutes. Well, I can be very brief, Mr. Chairman. All 3 projects are on schedule.
There you go.
I'm prepared to accept that. Is anybody else? Does anybody have any questions?
It's entirely up to you, sir. I certainly could just respond to any questions if that's what you prefer.
Thank you very much.
That's it?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Well, okay. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, well, thank you.
Ms. Battles, before we move on, I also want to say what an outstanding report. Your command of all that information is just amazing, all the programs and what have you. But thank you very much for all the work. And Mr. Raven, one of the things you were talking about getting these things late, it's just the way state government is. We can't, they just throw all of this at us, and we have to do the best we can.
If I may say also thank you to all the staff who helped. It was a really team effort across the agency as well as with the commissioner. So thank you.
The next item under agency operations is consideration of adopting the commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to Chapter 25, Subchapter A, Sections 25.3 to 25.6 of Board Rules concerning the optional retirement program. Ms. Tanya Scaparlanda, Director of Human Resources, will be available to answer any questions.
The optional retirement program is a statewide program for eligible employees at Texas Public Institutions of Higher Education. And it's an option in lieu of the, an alternate standard for the teacher retirement system. So eligible employees would be full-time faculty, librarians, and some of the administrator and professional positions at the university. And so they have the option of opting out of TRS in lieu of, and taking ORP as their retirement plan. And ORP is similar to a 401k plan with an employee and an employer contribution rate, contribution. In each institution, system, district, they administer their own plan. And there are approximately 38,000 participants in the state of Texas. ORP is also available to coordinating board employees that are eligible under certain position titles, directors and above typically. And we've got about 16 participants here at the coordinating board. There were 3 types of amendments that were recommended. One of the types was to incorporate changes that were made in legislation to state law and IRS-related interpretations. There were changes to make technical corrections and also to add clarifying language to the interpretation of the rules. Most of the changes were for cleanup purposes and are not expected to significantly impact ORP participants or institutions, administrators. There are several that may affect the institution's procedural processes in implementing the program. The most significant was due to LBB recommendations. Each institution submits a report to the coordinating board annually, and typically it was due on November 1st, but because the LBB wanted the information sooner, they have asked that we have the report due October 1st. And so that's one of the bigger procedural changes that I think will affect the institutions. There were a few comments when it was put up in the register for the 30-day comment period, and TRS had 3 comments. One of the comments was concerning what we called the form that participants use to elect ORP at an institution. Currently, we just say appropriate form, and we added the specific name of the form. TRS was concerned that if they ever wanted to change the name of the form, that we shouldn't specifically name the form. So we addressed that by naming the form and also including "or its successor." And the second concern was removing language that is a term submit, to submit the report or submit the form to TRS. And the concern was that it might be mistaken by the participant that they were supposed to submit it directly to TRS rather than to their institution. So we just removed that comment. We agreed with the comment and we just removed it. And the third one was a concern of the proposed additional text related to the initial ORP eligibility date. And again, our THECB staff responded by agreeing with the comment and removed that amendment. The University of Texas Systems also expressed some comments and concerns related to deletion of failure to notify error. If there's an administrative error on the part of somebody administering the program at a college or universities, an employee that has the option to elect ORP, they have a 90-day election period. And if that period passes, they default into TRS. So if the failure to notify, if the institution failed to notify the employee that they had the option to elect ORP in lieu of TRS, that the comment addressed whether or not the language should be in there of what to do if you fail to notify an employee. And we agree that the changes made in the amendments could possibly cause some concerns. So we want more time to further research this before actually moving forward with any amendments. So what we're asking is you to adopt the rules submitted for amendments to Chapter 25, including the staff's recommendations in response to the comments received. And prepared to answer any questions you might have.
Questions?
In that last item, so clearly, we don't have the good answer to UT's concern about the timely notification, yet we're being asked to adopt something that may be problematic. How are we going to fix that? If it turns out in your research that you realize that what we adopted is problematic, can we come back at the next board meeting and amend it?
We can, and what we're currently recommending is that we're not going to change that section right now.
Correct.
And we'll leave it as is. TRS ultimately is the one to say whether or not you're allowed to if the time, so for example, some universities were using this and going back a year to amend the election because they didn't notify the employee. TRS is saying that's not acceptable. If it was a day or two, they might say that's acceptable. So we almost really aren't in control of that. But yes, we can come back and amend it later once we gather more information on the topic.
Why are the institutions having to go back a year?
That would be a procedural issue on the institutions. They're not following their own plan or rules.
Okay,
So if somebody made an error,
That's what I thought the answer was. So errors have consequences,
yes.
unfortunately. So if we adopt it, those consequences may be defaulted on those institutions that didn't repair and their employees.
Yeah, currently the language is in our rules that talks about failure to notify.
Correct? And then that becomes the purview of the TRS that says it's no longer acceptable to go back more than a day or a week.
So
A year is entirely too long.
And they're still going to have to deal with those consequences between TRS and the employee they failed to notify.
Okay. I'm comfortable adopting it, and then after the research, we can come back. So I'll move that we accept this.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, so the motion was by Dr. Tischer and second by Mr. Raven. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
The last item under agency operations is a report on grants and contracts, including those exceeding $1 million. Bill France, General Counsel, will be available for questions. This item does not require any action. Does anybody have any questions for our General Counsel? Hearing none, let's move on. The first item under the finance section is a review of the year-to-date fiscal year 2016 financial report to the board. Ken Martin, Assistant Commissioner for Financial Services / CFO, will present this item to the committee.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members. In this report, we provide during each quarterly board meeting, the Finance Department, this report, a financial report summarizing the agency's fiscal year, year-to-date budget and financial activities. This report here is year-to-date from September 1st through the end of May 31st of 2016. A final report will be presented at the October AOC meeting that will represent the entire fiscal year of 2016. I'll walk through a few key highlights, and I know we're pressed for time, so if you have any questions and I go too fast, please let me know, but I'll walk through a couple key highlights. I want to turn your attention to page 3. And on this page, you'll note a couple items that I was just going to walk you through. On the far right column, under the line that has strategy A12, it's the second line down. You'll see a negative balance there. We have various contracts within our student loan program that require us to encumber, but we don't know the full amount. And I'll talk a little bit about some of those contracts relating to our collections agreement with the Office of Attorney General, another agenda item. But one of the contracts that we did add on, and again, it'll be another topic here in another agenda item, is a consulting contract that we invoked with a consultant for our student loan program, take a review of our student loan program more in depth. And that is the overage. I am waiting for these other contracts that we have to really finalize the invoicing, and we'll know a little more in August. We'll adjust encumbrances, and then I'll know a little closer what the actual balance, if we have an actual overage or not, and we'll submit a budget adjustment for that. We do have authority to vary the loan funds for that program. Another item to note in the B12 strategy, that is our Be On Time strategy, we were appropriated $110 million. $65 million was for a one-time disbursement to the institutions. There was a fund that was built up as we were collecting set-asides that was mandated by statute, and these were going unappropriated because the amount that were authorized to spend in the General Appropriations Act was less. So more money was coming in over since the prior recession and some budget cuts back in 2010, 2011 timeframe. This account, unappropriated account, had built up a balance. Last session in the 84th, they made a decision and added in one of our riders that will disperse $65 million back to the public institutions of Texas, and we had presented a allocation methodology in a prior meeting. And right now, we're just waiting for LBB approval of the allocation methodology and the authorization for the institutions to spend. So you'll notice why that's such a high balance there. The other line item to note is in our D18 strategy, graduate medical education expansion. There's a $23 million available balance. The Mr. Peoples division is working to disperse those funds, so those should be dispersed by year end. Any funds that are not will have UB authority next year. We also have a report that I just issued today to the deputies to look at. We have met with the divisions, had divisions provide input on not only their administrative funding, but their trustee funding on all these programs to make sure that we're spending our funds efficiently and utilizing all of the funds, and presented that and recommendations for options in areas that may have some available balances. So we'll be looking through that each month here, and next month we'll go through that same scenario we just went through this morning. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Any questions? Hearing none, the next item is consideration. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead. Yes, the next item is an update regarding the loan program internal audit management responses. Mr. Martin will present this item. This item does not require any action.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item I have brought forth to you since the October 2015 AOC when the audit was presented. Quick update here, there were 7 audit recommendations. 7 of 7 action items are in process of being implemented. And I have highlighted in the report updates, where we have provided action items there, which ones we've completed. And I wanted to provide a little bit of update on the program itself, on the loan program and Office of Student Financial Aid programs, and some of the actions we've taken since I've assumed the role, and we've had other staff members in the area assume roles, and since this audit. We hired a Deputy Assistant Commissioner to oversee the Office of Student Financial Aid programs, and he started in March of last year. We have replaced 2 directors in the program out of 3. One was promoted to Senior Director, and we have replaced 3 Assistant Director positions, and 1 is currently open on top of that, and we're seeking to replace that. All the individuals for these positions have come from the outside with extensive knowledge in their areas and expertise. We also have developed monthly metrics reporting to enhance performance monitoring. Borrower inquiries have been reduced from an average of 120 days to respond to 10 days or below, which is our desired service level. We also, as I discussed, hired a consultant to come on board, which was approved by the board, and started the engagement last week. We will be reporting on the results of this engagement in a future meeting. Their engagement with us from their time frame should last through December, and we should have a report of which, if we can, I'll try for the January meetings to present an update of their findings. And I'm happy to answer any questions on this report.
Any questions on that item? Hearing none, the next item is consideration of adopting the staff's recommendation to the committee relating to a contract with Pitney Bowes for postage services. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item does require approval, as well as the next 2. We obviously have postage services, and the Department of Information Resources has a master service agreement with Pitney Bowes. We have utilized that for several years, and we are requesting permission to continue that up to $350,000. It does not require an RFQ, and we make this request annually. And I'm happy to answer any questions if need be. And our loan program is the main driver. There are other expenditures for postage within the agency, but really ostensibly our loan program is the main driver. We have a lot of letters and notifications that go up.
Any questions? Do I have a motion for approval of this item?
Second.
Okay, so there's a motion by Mr. Stedman, seconded by Dr. Tischer. Any further discussion or any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. The next item is consideration of adopting the staff's recommendation of the committee relating to student loan program support services. Mr. Martin.
This is an item where we have entered into an agreement with the Office of Attorney General, and they provide collection support, litigation support for our student loan program. This has been a very successful agreement and partnership with the Office of Attorney General, and previously the board has approved that contract. Within that contract, it has a couple services, and we, in that contract, the OAG contract, have agreed to pay for those services. Now, when I came forth with the OAG contract and the approval for contract, and we had the amount approved for the direct reimbursement, I did not have each one of these line items in here. So for now, I will come before the board for approval for these items, which are on contract within the Office of Attorney General. And then in our next renewal with the Office of Attorney General, I'll seek approval for not only the direct reimbursement, but then enough authority to cover these items as well. But let me go over a few. One, the Office of Attorney General issues citations for our loans when need to for litigation support. They use two different vendors for that, and Texas EasyServe and Executive Process, and it is at their discretion of which vendors that they will utilize based on their needs. Also, the Office of Attorney General utilizes File and Express, Serve Express, an e-file for case filings, and the estimated cost is $250,000. Separate from that, we have the Texas what we call NIC USA, and that is a DIR contract that exists today, and that's for student loan payments that are made. These type of payments are credit card, automated clearinghouse, debit, et cetera, that come through, allowing individuals to make payments to their student loans and utilizing this service. This is a service that state contracts with, and we would actually be required to request authority from their board to deviate from using this service. We are requesting permission for $450,000 for the fiscal year 2017 under this contract. And again, none of these require RFQ RFAs, and they are all under existing contracts and existing agreements.
I have a couple of questions, Mr. Chairman. For the issuing of citation, the estimated cost is $350,000. Is that statewide, or is that just for, how many counties are they actually issuing citations, serving citations?
That is statewide for our student loan program.
And do we pay them a fat amount? And if there are only 100 citations, that's all they issue? If there's just 10, how do we know that? How do we determine how much each citation is actually costing us? Because that seems to be, quite frankly, to me, a lot.
Well, one item to note, we're requesting up to $350,000. We may not utilize that full amount, and as I mentioned previously in the financial report, that as we look at the student loan program, these are being charged there, and as we get to year end, we'll fully encumber $350,000. We may only utilize $250,000, and part of it is we don't know because it depends on the litigation they have to provide each year. The volume can vary if they're, depending on what type of items and how many litigation items that they have to go through. It has been a very successful program. I'll point out, this has been brought up before, that initially we had collections when the collection team was in-house in this agency of about $3 million on an annual basis. They are collecting on a run rate of $10 million on an annual basis. They have grown the collection ability, the dollar amount, at least 15% on an annual basis over the last 6 years. So for a return on our investment, I would say it is a very good return. Now, with these contracts, these are contracts within that the Office of Attorney General has. We're reimbursing them for the service. So we don't have discretion to renegotiate.
Well, that's my question. I understand that they may be successful at obtaining monies from delinquent loan recipients, but that is separate and apart from how much you're paying for to have somebody served. That whether they are filing 1,000 suits or filing 500, it just seems to me that $350,000 to pay somebody to go out and serve them with a lawsuit seems to me to be a lot of money, and then to pay them $450,000 for the use of for the person paying the money back for the credit card fee. I'd be curious to know as to how much they are charging the Attorney General's office, the credit card company, for that.
Well, on the credit card fee, that is actually charged directly to us since that is a state contract. We pay 25 cents on certain transaction. We pay up to $1 for others. On the credit card, it's $1 and then 25 cents on ACH. And we have significant number. We have a $1.5 billion loan portfolio. We have significant number of payments that run through that. We use a lockbox service as well. That's for checks, et cetera, and we pay a fee per check on through that service. So if they're not making payments through here, we're paying a fee through the check. But for here, it's been very efficient from a payment processing, automated through our system, control standpoint. People aren't having to handle cash, handle checks, et cetera.
So, Mr. Martin, you can get that information to Mr. Raven, can't you?
Yes,
Because
sir.
I think that is good about having people on a board like this.
Absolutely.
He's got some
Absolutely.
expertise in that area, and if you give him that information, he might be able to advise us whether that's, we're getting our money's worth.
Yeah, and
Well,
I'm
I mean,
happy
I'd be more than glad to get it, because it just, I mean, I'm very familiar with all three of these, and it just seems to me that $350,000 for citations statewide, that's a lot of money. I mean, it really is. When you consider, I mean, when I have somebody sued, and have somebody served, it's less than $100.
Ricky, if you don't mind me asking, because I don't have any expertise in this, and you clearly do, what do you think the number should be?
Well, I'd have to first find out how many lawsuits are actually being filed.
Okay.
I mean, but let's just assume it's 1,000.
and
That's 100,000.
I can go back and
Right.
get that data. It is a per fee, and we
Yeah,
can
he's
get the
looking-
number of
You're looking to get
quantity.
a figure per citation.
Sure, correct. And how many lawsuits is the Attorney General filing on behalf of this agency? Because I would assume that the number that they've quoted here, that we have here, is to pay them for what they filed on behalf of us. And there may be a disconnect there.
And is that something you can have for the board tomorrow?
That is correct, yes, sir.
Thank
I
you,
just
that's all I
want to point out that we don't have this agenda item going to the full board tomorrow because it's not required. Our board rules don't require us to go to the full board for these amounts. So how would you like to handle that?
Well, do we have to approve it today?
Let me ask the parliamentarian here, can we move to postpone this to time certain, a board meeting tomorrow, if it's not on the board agenda?
I know we can't do that if it's not on the agenda, but does it have to be done today?
If I may, I don't believe this needs to be done today, but I think, and correct me, Ken, if I'm wrong, I believe the contract's expiration is August 31?
These are existing contracts, but we need your permission because we only have permission from the prior board approval through 8/31. So as of 9/1, we would need approval for the service. One recommendation, if I could make, is approving these as they are. I can provide more information either at the board tomorrow or outside the board if it doesn't fit within the agenda. And then if need be, based on recommendations of chair, vice chair, et cetera, we can come back in October, and then we could decide if we want to do something else, if that's allowable.
I don't know how we would be able to do that if we enter into a 2-year contract. We're in contract. We can't then unilaterally change the contract, sir. Right? Am I reading what our action item is?
We entered into an agreement with the Office of Attorney General for 2 years. I've come to you every year for each one of these contracts previously. And these are already these are contracts that the state has already, so, and the Office of Attorney General, so we would need to do something different if we decided not to utilize these contracts.
And if I may, I know, and I'm not sure that I have reviewed the current contract. However, previous contracts were to cover costs. And so if the question is, at $350,000 for service certainly sounds high.
Yeah.
Presuming the current contract is the same as the previous and is designed to cover costs, that would be a number that should reflect the actual cost to the Attorney General to effectuate service. And we presumably get a report, and I'll defer to Ken on this, from the Attorney General delineating the various costs that it incurs in order to handle our collections. Ron Del Vento was here. He's the chief of the bankruptcy and collections section for the Attorney General. I believe he was here a year ago to present to the board. And again, it's, for the reason Mr. Steen gave, it's difficult to postpone this to tomorrow because there's no notice posting. But we could always have Mr. Del Vento, I don't know if you want to do a special called board meeting just for this, but
Well, I've got a thought that, Mr. Martin, you're about to wrap up your part of this. Could you go get the information if we just deferred this item till the end of the meeting? Did you get the information that he needs?
Let me try.
All right, let's do that. Okay. Is that okay, Mr. Raven? We'll just pass this and come back in later? All right.
You need a motion to table.
No, I think, do we,
it looked like that was consensual to me, and that's why I didn't say anything.
Okay.
I don't think, did,
He's saying you can move on.
okay, let's move on. Okay, we'll just circle back to it, okay. The last item under the finance section is consideration of adapting the staff's recommendation to the committee relating to invoking the option years of the contract with First Southwest LLC to provide support for the arbitrage rebate and yield restriction liabilities of the agency's student loan bonds. Mr. Martin.
Thank you. The board retains a financial advisor to advise board staff on the issuance and continued support of tax-exempt general obligation bonds that provide funds for our Hinson Hayes-Wood student loan program. The financial advisor's role that is specific in this contract is for providing arbitrage, liability, and yield rebate calculations. These are specific requirements that are required by the IRS and that you can only, in essence, make a differential on, since they're tax exempt on the bonds from what you are utilizing them for, and that the yield cannot exceed a specified amount. The financial advisor provides the calculation either on an annual basis or on a 5-year basis, depending the type of item, and they provide that to us, because if we exceed that, then there is a rebate that is required to be filed back to the federal government. We have to pay to the IRS. We have 16 individual bond series that are outstanding. The annual expense ranges from $62,000 or $15,000 to $62,000, and that just depends on how much we're utilizing them, as well as how many bonds come up in that series of the 16 that we have that are required to have this calculation performed. The Hinson Hazelwood Loan Program is funded by bond proceeds for the issuance of student loans. It's self-supporting. No general obligation revenue is used to provide this for this particular CAL loan program. Our Be On Time is funded by GR support, but not for our CAL. And they help the financial advisor ensure compliance with the IRS. I'm happy to answer any questions. And this is to invoke the 2-year option. So we have a contract with 2 years and then 2 option years. This would invoke the 2 option years.
Any questions or discussion?
Move approval.
Motion by Dr. Titcher. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Raven. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. So, Mr. Martin, you're going to go see if you can get that information. All right, thank you. The first item under the internal audit section is discussion of the agency-wide financial statements for fiscal year ended August 31, 2015 by KPMG LLP. Susan Warren with KPMG LLP will present this item to the committee. This item does not require any action.
Thank you. I will go through the results of the 2015 audit. You should have the presentation in front of you. The first agenda just tells you we're going to remind responsibilities and then really get to the results, which is sort of what everybody's interested in. The management's responsibilities, we did talk about this at the April OSC meeting. This is the list of things that management does to get ready for the audit. I won't go back through those unless somebody has a question. On slide 3 is just a reminder that the committee's responsibility is to oversee management during this process. Slide 4 tells you that basically you hired KPMG to put an opinion on the financial statements and to follow all those standards that are listed there for your reference. And then what everybody's interested in is this very short, sweet slide, which is what you want, It says a clean, unmodified opinion, no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies, no corrected audit adjustments. So a very clean audit. And I'll offer my congratulations to the commissioner and Linda and her team for that. I'm assuming there's no questions on that slide. Okay, just checking.
That was a good one.
Okay, so just make sure you're listening. Okay, so there are a couple other things I am required to let you know. If you so choose, and note one of the financial statements or all the accounting policies that your management team has adopted. We noted nothing unusual in those policies for an entity like the coordinating board. Footnote, there's a disclosure that, as we mentioned during planning, we had to adopt the new GASB 68, which is the pension standard that many of you have heard about. It basically put a liability on your balance sheet for the pension money that you owe for the employees of the coordinating board, and that liability was $31 million. So it is now recorded on your balance sheet. Slide 7 reminds you that there are estimates in your financial statements, the biggest one being the loan for loss reserve. We do take a look at that pretty hard. We look at the assumptions your management team has built into that process. We make sure they comply with industry standards. As noted, we found them to be reasonable. Slide 8, again, it all says none, so there's really nothing here to discuss. These are all the things that if we had problems during the audit, I'd be required to tell you about, so none noted is a very good sign. Slide 9, these are, as I mentioned, we had a clean audit, but at the request of the committee, we also present to you what we refer to as control deficiencies or verbal comments. These are things that we tell management, just point out to them and things they might want to consider for improvement. And so we have this slide here from last year, try to clarify, is some of these were discussed at the April AOC meeting where I talked about the federal results of the audit. And then there are a couple of new ones relating to the financial, because that work does overlap. Some of the system work is the same. So we have 4 carry forwards, so we've already talked about those. I'll just point them out. And we have 2 new ones. So on slide 10, these are both carry forwards. In summary, we had some password settings that didn't align with policies that your management team is already correcting. And we had some terminated users that were not removed from all the systems. You can see the mitigations and why we were able to consider that not to be a high-risk area. I will tell you on that last one, on terminated users, in the manual environment that you currently operate on, this is going to repeat year to year to year to year because it's near impossible to fix this without automation. So just prepare that it will continue.
And if I can add, our exceptional item request will help with this, if we can get the funding to support additional dollars to support
I'll be all for
technology.
that. So I don't have to keep explaining. Slide 11, we have another carry forward one at the top. We have developers with access to the MIP reporting piece of the application. Your team is aware of that, has monitoring controls in place. There's a business reason for that. Number 4 is a new one. During an audit, we look at what we call program change requests. So if your business team needs a change to an IT system, whether it's a new report or a new column added or some new functionality, they have to fill out a business case for that and explain what it is. It has to be approved. The IT team has to develop it and test it and then deploy it and get a final approval before we actually put it into use. That is called a change management process. There's lots of approvals and documentation along the way. So when we pull those samples, we look for all those documentation to make sure you comply with your policy. We had a couple of samples where all the paperwork wasn't in the file, but we were able to look at emails and various other things to make sure that it had flowed through the process. Again, this is currently a manual process. Automation would help with this, and I think she's going to tell you it's in the exception list. So. Slide 12, generic administrative account. This is a new one. When sometimes you have system upgrades and things that come with generic accounts to help with that process, some of them are necessary and they're reasonable to be there. This one was actually, if you'll notice on the slide, it was never used, and so your team removed it. They're just it's a house cleaning item is what we refer to it as. If it's not a necessary account, it should be removed. And then the last one is a carry forward from the audit. It had to do with a loan not being processed timely as far as status change. That means basically they might have gone from in-school to graduation or graduation to repayment. And as a result of that, y'all had to pay the government back. It was less than $25. So it was not material by any means. Questions?
Mr. Chairman, may I just point out that you have a handout at your places that shows the status of these verbal comments, management response and mitigation, and date of completion, whether they've been done or ongoing. So this is just to help us keep track of where we're at in terms of the verbal comments, since they don't appear in the audit report.
Any other questions? Any questions or any discussion? Ms. Warren, thank you for rushing through that. I appreciate it.
I knew you were in a hurry.
And
Thank you.
Thank you for your great work. Appreciate it. The next item under the internal audit section is discussion of the Texas Guaranteed Student Loan Corporation audit of the Federal Family Education Loan Program, including an audit report dated February 17th, 2016, and a closure letter dated April 8th, 2016. Mark Pale will present this item. This item does not require any action.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is an informational item presenting the results of this audit by Texas Guaranteed Student Loan Corporation. The audit was conducted jointly with the U.S. Department of Education, so this is the second and final report regarding the audit. As you can see from your materials, there were 3 findings noted in the auditor's report from February 17th, 2016, and then there were 2 closure letters thereafter that accepted management's corrective action plans to address the findings. The findings are summarized on your agenda page, and I'll be happy to address any questions that you may have. One thing I would point out, there's a significant lag in time in terms of the audit period for this audit. So the audit period was actually 2011 to 2014. So you've heard some other comments about from Mr. Martin on the changes in management and some of the improvements to our student loan processes. So the time period audited here certainly predated much of that.
All right, any questions? All right, we'll move on. The next item under the internal audit section is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the annual internal audit plan for 2017. Mr. Pale.
Thank you. This work plan is developed each year using a comprehensive risk assessment process, and I'd like to briefly talk about the approach and some highlights from the plan. We break our plan into categories of projects, and the first category are those audits that are performed based on requirements such as state law or auditing standards. An example are follow-up audits where we come back in and look at the status of corrective actions taken on findings that are outstanding. Another example is the investigation of complaints that were the focal point for complaints that are often passed to us from the Texas State Auditor's Office. So again, that's a requirement that we do some due diligence on those. The next category of projects in our plan are risk-based audits. Here we schedule work in key complex areas such as information systems, financial aid, and borrower services. Our goal is to provide at least some coverage in each of these areas each year, either through audits or follow-up audits. Then, as resources allow, we try to cycle through other organization areas at least once every few years. So that's the other areas that we like to cycle through are based on risk periodically. You should have at your place a one-page diagram that looks like this.
Is that this one?
Yes. It's titled Depiction of Multi-Year Audit Coverage based on current level of internal audit resources. And I wanted to provide this to you because you can see this gives you kind of a graphical view of how often we're able to cycle through some of those other areas. If you look, for example, at item number 6 on that chart, college readiness and success, you would see approximately a 5-year audit interval. So based on the staffing, which is myself and 2 internal audit staff, that's about how often we can get through some of these other audit areas. And so that's just an important consideration for the board, just to understand the level of coverage that we're able to provide in these areas.
Mr. Pale, tell me what you think about that with a 5-year audit interval on something like that.
Well, certainly that's we would like for it to be more frequent than that. You know, we've had some discussions just about the challenges with the level of resources that we have. Back in October of 2014, I presented to the board some benchmarking information based on a number of factors, and I guess the average of those factors indicated a staffing of 4, and so 1 additional position was allotted at that time, which brought us up to 3. But 4, I think 4 is still certainly supported. It just becomes a matter of prioritization, and clearly, this board has been tasked with considering that on a number of fronts today with the budget and so forth.
Just along those lines, Mark, items 7, 8, and 9, you have one on 18, 19, and 20 for each of those. So what's the frequency with which those are performed? Because I can't tell.
The same.
5 years?
If the chart went out further, they would repeat roughly every 5 years.
Roughly every 5.
Yeah.
That's what I was getting clarification.
Right.
Yeah, so when we benchmarked it, really you should have, you have 3, including yourself, and really you should have 4 based on that benchmarking exercise.
That's correct.
And what's the, what would be ballpark to add an additional auditor?
Well, the appropriate add, the last edition was at a sort of a team lead level, which is a little bit more expensive. This edition would be another entry-level position, so roughly $75,000 plus benefits.
So, Mr. Chairman and the Commissioner, this is something, of course, I'm chairing this meeting, but this is something I think is important, and I sure want to have a robust auditing function, and I really think, I know we've been talking about cutting back on everything, but this is an area, if the decision were mine, I'd like to see another auditor. I don't know if you want to comment on that.
We recognize how important that is. We have, as Mark has indicated, we've increased the staff size significantly over the past few years. We have other priorities, and we're trying to figure out how to do it. When I first came to the coordinating board, we had 1 auditor, period. So we've increased, but we are looking for ways to do this, and we recognize that it's a priority of the board, and particularly a priority of yours, Mr. Steen.
Well, what I often comment on is that we're all volunteers up here, and we really depend on this auditing function to make sure everything's going well within the agency. It's very important to me, and I just want to make sure that, and I think Mr. Pale's doing an outstanding job. I know working closely with him, they get a little overwhelmed with all the requests they have. And I think another auditor would be justified, and maybe that's a discussion for another day, but I want to comment on it since we're talking about the annual audit, internal audit plan for next year. Does anybody else have any thoughts on it? All right. Do I have a motion to adopt the annual internal audit plan for 2017?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, so there's a motion by Mr. Raven, seconded by Dr. Tischer. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. The final item under the internal audit section is an update on internal audit reports and activities. Mr. Pale will present this item, and this does not require any action.
Thank you. We completed 2 internal audit projects since our previous meeting in April, and both reports are in your packet. One was a follow-up audit for some outstanding state auditor recommendation, and I'm pleased to report that actions were taken to address those 4 state auditor recommendations. The second report in your packet is an audit of TEG. That report received a Category 2 rating. It had 5 recommendations to strengthen the administration of the TEG program, and the report includes management's response with corrective actions that are planned to address our recommendations. If there are no questions on those reports, I'd lastly like to inform you that we've contracted with a consultant to perform our required peer review. This process has just begun, and you will be receiving a report on the results at the October meeting. That concludes my report.
Okay, any questions or any discussion on this item? All right, let's move to the first item under compliance monitoring is an update on compliance monitoring reports and activities. Mr. Pale will present this item, and this item does not require any action.
We have a brief update, Mr. Chairman. We've completed 3 compliance monitoring projects since our prior meeting in April. 2 of the 3 reports had no findings and are included in your materials under this agenda item. The 3rd report on South Texas College is included separately under the next agenda item. The 2 reports were UT Health Science Center San Antonio formula funding and the University of Incarnate Word, TEG, both with no findings. And that is my compliance monitoring update.
Sorry, the next item under compliance monitoring is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the annual compliance monitoring plan for 2017. Mr. Pale.
Thank you. Like the internal audit work plan, the compliance monitoring work plan is developed each year using a comprehensive risk assessment process, and I'll just touch on a few items regarding the plan preparation and contents. For compliance monitoring, we're guided by statute, particularly Education Code 61035, to perform our work along 2 key dimensions: formula funding, data integrity, and then financial assistance for students, our trustee funds that flow to the institutions across the state. First, for formula funding, about $4 billion per year. We've scheduled 12 projects across a variety of institution sizes and types. This is done deliberately to ensure that we get a good cross-representation of our public institutions that receive formula funding. We also follow up on prior audit results in this area. And then the second area, financial assistance, here we're talking about $886 million annually of trustee funds that we review for compliance with program requirements. Again, we stratify our universe into different categories of institutions, including, in this case, private institutions, and the plan includes 12 risk-based projects in a cross-section of institution types, again, with follow-up on prior results in this area. And that is my presentation of our compliance monitoring plan. I seek your approval.
Any questions? Do I have a motion to adopt the annual compliance monitoring plan for 2017?
Moved.
All right, so it's a motion by Dr. Tischer, seconded by Mr. Stedman. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. The next item under compliance monitoring is consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the final report and audit of formula funding at South Texas College. Mr. Pale will present this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My team member is approaching. I'll introduce him. Paul Mayert. Mr. Mayert was instrumental in the work performed at both Weatherford College and South Texas College, so I've asked him to be available to assist in responding to questions today. Likewise, before we get into the meat of the discussion, I must certainly thank the president and staff of South Texas College, Dr. Shirley Reed. Dr. Reed and her staff were very professional and fully cooperative as we conducted our work. Our experience in working with South Texas College will undoubtedly lead to positive change in this area, so I want to certainly acknowledge that up front. I will discuss similarities and differences from the Weatherford College audit report discussed at the April AOC meeting and some key points for your consideration. As you may recall,
Mr. Pale,
certainly.
before we go on, so you're going to make this presentation, and then is the thought that we'd have Dr. Reed, and Dr. Reed, would you be coming up by yourself, or do you want to bring your staff up with you? Great, okay, let's proceed.
Okay. As you may recall, the Weatherford audit resulted in the AOC accepting Weatherford's offer to repay $1.4 million and honoring that institution's request to spread the repayment over time to reduce the budgetary impact. For both Weatherford College and South Texas College, we're talking about continuing education contact hours, not about courses that result in academic credit. So that's an important point. The South Texas College report in your materials questions $2.3 million in formula funding received by the college for the same 2014-2015 reporting period as for Weatherford College. This audit used the same approach as the Weatherford College audit in that we worked closely with Dr. Rex Peebles and his team in understanding and evaluating the continuing education contact hours reported by South Texas College. Dr. Peebles is prepared to provide remarks to you today as well. It's important that you understand that the statute and rules that govern continuing education contact hours, specifically those related to juvenile age students, were the subject of our general counsel's concurrence that the interpretation used in the Weatherford audit were appropriate. The same statute and rules were used in the South Texas College audit, and the South Texas College management response indicates that South Texas College has a very different interpretation of statute and rules than those of this agency. Key areas of non-compliant reporting relate to juvenile age of students reported by South Texas College and the zero tuition charged and collected by South Texas College for those courses and the corresponding contact hours. First, with respect to age, significant numbers of students under the age of 18, including 1,961 students 15 years old, 703 14 years old, 9 13 years old, and 3 under 13. Statute uses the term continuing adult education, and rule further specifies that such continuing education is to prepare students for immediate employment. 13 and 14-year-olds are not immediately employable, and federal and state labor laws place restrictions on employing individuals under the age of 18, 16, and 14. Second, in the area of tuition requirement, South Texas College did not charge tuition for the questioned students. Receiving formula funding while waiving tuition is available for dual credit courses, but not for continuing education courses. The agreements that South Texas College made with local school districts to teach those continuing education courses place substantially all costs on the ISD, other than administrative overhead for South Texas College. This raises important policy questions regarding formula funding from the state's standpoint. First, is it equitable to provide full formula funding to South Texas College, knowing that South Texas College has no direct instructional costs to teach the continuing education classes? Second, is the state positioned to pay the independent school district for the student as part of average daily attendance, while at the same time paying South Texas College the full contact hour formula funding rate for the student to take a continuing education class? This is allowable for dual credit courses, but the state makes some very important distinctions regarding dual credit courses, such as the transferability of academic credit hours. Next, I would point you to the laws of statistics in considering whether or not there was widespread confusion regarding the rules over continuing education contact hour reporting among the 76 community college reporting entities. 2 colleges account for roughly 80% of the juvenile hours reported. Taken a step further, these same 2 colleges account for 94% of continuing education contact hours for students under the age of 16. If the rules were difficult to understand in this area and the guidance misunderstood, then why wouldn't there be a more representative group of colleges reporting significant numbers of juveniles for the time period under review? All of this is not to say that improvements aren't needed within the coordinating board. The second issue in the South Texas College audit report was actually directed to Dr. Paredes and the coordinating board with a call for clarifying and expanding guidance regarding continuing education contact hour reporting. Dr. Peebles will speak to you about corrective actions taken and planned in this area. The South Texas College Audit Response speaks of information promulgated by the Coordinating Board, including an email exchange in 2013, which is on the text box of page 8 of the report in your materials. The erroneous response provided by the Coordinating Board staff could account for juniors and seniors having been reported if staff advice were followed, but it would not speak to the reporting of freshman and sophomore age students. The South Texas Audit Response speaks of an erroneous Coordinating Board developed FAQ document that poorly addressed the issues of minimum age and tuition requirements. This document was unlinked on the Coordinating Board website in 2014, but it was still accessible until recently by a broader Google search. The South Texas College Response speaks of a compliance monitoring audit of formula funding at South Texas College that was reported in 2013 with no findings. The risks associated with juvenile age continuing education contact hours were minimal at the time of the audit for the base period of 2012 to 2013. This reporting increased fivefold for the base period of 2014 to 2015, the time period of the current audit. Finally, the South Texas College Response characterizes the changes in Coordinating Board guidance as insignificant, namely the Guidelines for Instructional Programs in Workforce Education Manual, which is promulgated through Dr. Peebles' area. Respectfully, this is a change in position that was communicated over the course of the audit. Initially, South Texas College communicated to the auditors that it relied heavily on the Coordinating Board to provide reporting guidance, including the institution's reliance on the GIPWE, the acronym GIPWE manual. Once the auditors pointed out that the change in the manual from 2010 to 2015 and the removal of language regarding zero tuition as a possibility, South Texas College stated that the reporting changes were insignificant and that insufficient training had been provided regarding these changes. However, oral and written comments by South Texas College show that they were aware of the changes in the 2015 GIPWE, and they were aware of comments made by Dr. Peebles regarding the inadvisability of submitting high school age students for continuing education formula funding. South Texas College did not seek further clarification and continued with the same reporting practices. At this time, I would like to conclude my remarks.
And I would just like to add that we have conducted or in the process of conducting a thorough review of the rules connected with this and also the guidelines for instructional programs in workforce education, otherwise known as the GIPWE, which actually functions as rules for those programs to make sure that going forward it's very clear and very explicit about what is and is not allowable. And we were kind of waiting until the outcome of these two, of the audit report, both for Weatherford and for South Texas, before we finalize that guidance that we'll then be issuing to the field.
That concludes my portion of at least presenting the audit report, and I think it's appropriate at this time if South Texas College could be invited.
Does your colleague have anything to add?
Unless you have questions, I think Mr. Pell covered it pretty well, so we're good for now.
Go ahead, Ms. Shepard.
Just a question of the timeline. How many per year? So it began in 2014. Were there more in 15, more even this year, or when did we actually see the bulk of the students? Or
2013 was the
2013
was the big
biggest
increase,
group.
right? 2013, 14.
Any questions? Do we want to invite Dr. Reed up at this point?
Sure.
Dr. Reed, welcome, and sorry for the wait, and thank you for being patient. If you'll introduce yourself and then the staff members you brought along.
Yes. First of all, thank you for the opportunity. I'm Shirley Reed. I serve as the president of South Texas College, and with me today we have Laura Sanchez, who serves as our Dean of Instructional Research and Effectiveness, and Mr. Juan Carlos Aguirre, who is Dean of our Continuing Education, Professional, and Workforce Education programs. I would like to begin by expressing appreciation to Mark Pale and Paul Myerd for their professionalism, for their patience. I believe they made over 3 trips to South Texas College to talk with us and to make sure they had a clear understanding of how we made the decisions we made. This is a difficult situation, not only for South Texas College, but also for the coordinating board. But I want to assure you that our only intent was to respond to the needs specifically of students who are not prepared to pursue credit programs. You know the geography of South Texas, you know the diversity of South Texas. We are trying to respond to some very challenging circumstances in our geographic region. The continuing ed non-credit courses, they were developed specifically to promote basic employability skills that would serve as prerequisites for courses that would be eventually credit workforce development courses. And Mark already commented on the basis for our decision-making. First, the audit report in 2013. We were doing the same thing in 2013 as we are doing today. There were no findings that gave us the assurance that there really weren't concerns. The second was the 2010 GWIPWE, which didn't address tuition or age for continuing ed. Then the revision in the 2015 GIPWE, I know the coordinating board put forth major effort in this revision, but when it was all said and done, no specific guidance was provided regarding age of students or tuition regarding continuing education. It's already been mentioned about the frequently asked questions that we did use for guidance and direction, and the email that was provided by coordinating board staff. And to this day, we agree with the guidance that was provided by the coordinating board staff. I do want to say that continuing ed has evolved tremendously over the last decade. It isn't basket weaving and floral design any longer. It's a very effective strategy for working with not only high school students, but adults who are simply not prepared to complete high school or to go into credit workforce programs. The state must have a strategy to respond to that large number we have in the state of Texas. The intent of our programs were twofold. One, to provide workforce opportunities to high school students who are simply not prepared to go into credit programs. Preparing a student for a position with Burger King is a major economic development strategy. The second area was the TCLO certified police academy training that we had extensive participation. It was permitted in the GIPWE because we had a contractual arrangement with what's called the Lower Rio Grande Development Council. This provision was removed in the 2015 GIPWE. I know you have extensive materials. I'm sorry.
I know that we've got some relatively new board members, and we've got these
Yes.
acronyms floating around, and so GIPWE is, let me see if I can find it here. It's the Guidelines for
Guidelines.
Instructional Programs in Workforce Education. So that's what you mean when you say.
That's the guideline that we use in the development of our workforce programs. In the materials that you have the report as prepared by Mark, but I do call your attention to 3 attachments we included to that audit. The first one was our interpretation of the applicable rules and the statutes. We are not attorneys. We have interpreted the statutes, and our conclusions differ substantially from Mark's. The second attachment is our analysis and interpretation of the 2015 GIPWE. We do not believe that the revisions were substantially different than the earlier publication, and they did not address age and tuition. And the third attachment is our response to the preliminary audit, concerns that we raised that were not addressed in the final audit report. I know time is very limited, so I want to give Dean Aguirre the opportunity to share with you why this approach in continuing ed was so critical to our community. And then following Dean Aguirre, I'd like to give Dean Sanchez an opportunity to explain South Texas College's interpretation of the rules and how they differ from other interpretations presented to us.
Thank you, Dr. Reed, and thank you, everyone. Juan Carlos Aguirre, Dean of Continuing Professional and Workforce Education at South Texas College. In the 2 counties that we serve in South Texas, Hidalgo and Starr County, 41% of high school students don't pursue a college degree or a certificate, not even one that's TSI waived. And current high school dropout rates have resulted in about 206,000 individuals over age 18 that have less than a high school education, and 35% of our population living below the poverty line. So these statistics have moved us to take action. Therefore, the Employability Skills Program at South Texas College was designed to address and meet a very highly critical local need, giving the students the opportunity to experience and succeed in a post-secondary course at the high school, encourage them to graduate, and giving them the confidence to pursue a credit program. The initiative has actually empowered students to do 2 things. One of them, to gain the knowledge and skills to help them become employable. And secondly, has empowered them with a continuing education certificate to take to employers and applying for an entry-level job, keep it, and in so doing, provide for the well-being, financial well-being of their families. Quite frankly, many of those students, this is the only credential that they will ever obtain due to their economic situation and their current situation. A little over 65% of the students that we have served have indicated that they were able to find the job that they applied for thanks to the continuing education certificate they received from South Texas College. Overwhelmingly, school districts have embraced the initiative because it engages students, it keeps them motivated, and it increases their opportunity to get a much-needed job. So additionally, the school districts have absorbed all the instructional costs. So therefore, at that point, South Texas College was able to waive tuition. Since the inception of the initiative, employability skills, customer service skills, frontline supervisor skills, and leadership skills, continuing education courses taught at the high school have become precursors to workforce credit programs at South Texas College. We work very closely with the school districts in establishing a creditable quality program at South Texas College being taught at the high schools. South Texas College developed the curriculum. We work very closely with the high school teachers to embed it into and align it to their high school elective courses. We provided professional development at the onset, and we continued mentoring and monitoring teachers throughout the year, and then we observed both teachers and students to ensure quality of instruction, quality of teaching, quality of teaching, quality of training. Then we asked ourselves, can we report these contact hours for formula funding to offset the overhead costs associated with the initiative? Well, as Dr. Reed indicated, we consulted with the continuing education, workforce training, frequently asked questions, GIPWE 2010, and then we asked in writing via email guidance from the coordinating board. And then we got audited in 2013 on the same courses that we're talking about today. So the answer was an unequivocal yes. We did our homework. We reviewed resources. We consulted with the coordinating board to validate our understanding. Not one, but 4 separate resources from the coordinating board guided our actions. Not one, but 4. The FAQs, GIPWE 2010, email correspondence, and the 2013 audit. We strongly believe that this program at South Texas College truly helps all students, but let me tell you something, in particular, those that have been marginalized because of low socioeconomic conditions, lack of college-going guidance at home, and a history of academic challenges. Now, I would like for you to know that my trust and confidence in the system is shattered at best. How can I, along with the rest of community colleges in the state of Texas, ever trust any guidance that we get from the coordinating board in the future? How can I? How can colleges, including South Texas College, launch new initiatives, knowing that even if we get guidance from the coordinating board, it could be deemed erroneous at a later time? And then all the contact hours reported will be ineligible for formula funding. On behalf of all the community colleges across the state of Texas, I respectfully ask that the coordinating board honorably take responsibility for the guidance provided as the first step to restore credibility, much needed credibility. Thank you very much.
Go ahead, Ms. Shepard.
I have a question, Mr. Aguirre. So in the email, I see the response from the staff said, college-level workforce-related course. What kind of a college-level workforce, what kind of a course can you teach to a 12-year-old?
Employability skills is one of them.
I'm sorry?
Employability skills, which is 80 hours of skills in resume writing, interviewing skills, computer application skills, time management.
And then what kind of a job is a 12-year-old going to go get with that after they finish their course?
Yeah, the actual, we were targeting, high school students, right? And typically the age is 14.
Well, I wasn't in high school when I was 12, so I'm trying to figure out how you recruited these students down in junior high.
Well, no, we go to the high schools. We teach it at the high school. It's up to the high schools to enroll students at the age that they accept them. So we just go to the high schools. We don't do this at middle schools, only the high schools.
But they then recruit them from the middle schools to come to the high school for these classes?
Not for the classes, no. Mm-hmm.
Well, if I'm 12, where am I going to take the class? I'm sorry, I'm
At
confused.
the high schools. It's all at the high schools. What the initiative that we have launched is at the high schools only.
And I just want to understand, you weren't really doing the teaching. The high school ISD
Teachers.
was doing the
Correct,
teaching.
yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess I'm a little concerned about, I understand your trust issue now with the board, but as a taxpayer, I'm a little concerned about double dipping for students that really weren't taking college level courses, yet we were paying formula funding for students that were, well, I guess there were a few that were younger than 12. So maybe an 11-year-old, 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 14-year-olds, and then they really can't get a job till they're 16, right?
14.
14.
14. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, and that's why we sought guidance. We approached the coordinating board for guidance.
So you felt like when you got this answer that all the courses you were teaching were college-level courses?
They are
And they were
college-level.
transferable to a college?
No, not transferable. No, these are just post-secondary courses from the WECM, the Workforce Education Course Manual. That's where the courses come from.
How do you think the misunderstanding was so egregious for you, but there were just a sprinkling of students around the state at the other community colleges other than Weatherford?
Well, maybe because they didn't seek guidance. Maybe they were just going by what was in writing. We actually sought guidance. And the question posed was, can we report the students for formula funding for courses being taught or being integrated into high school courses? The question was very clear.
Can you
and the
give
answer was very
me
clear.
more descriptions of the college-level courses you were teaching to 14-year-olds?
That's one of them, employability skills, and the other one, customer service skills, knowing that most of the students, when they, at age 14 and above, end up, working in occupations that require customer service. That's the other one. Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm just going to beg to differ with you. I don't think those are college-level courses. It's not English 101. It's not, algebra, college algebra. It's not, those are not really any courses that formula funding should be used for.
I think it's important to distinguish between credit college courses and, you're right, English, algebra, history, government. These are non-credit continuing ed courses. They are not expected to be taught at the TSI readiness standards. Continuing ed has a very different function in higher ed.
So I would have, if that had been me getting that answer from the coordinating board, I think I would have asked for more clarification.
We thought our question was clear, and we thought the response was clear. We can all reflect back with hindsight, but at the time, we thought it was quite clear.
Perhaps if I go into some of our understandings of the interpretation of the rules and the guidance that we were relying on, it might
So, Dr. Reed, this is what you wanted to transition to Dean Sanchez.
Yes, I would like Dean
all right.
Sanchez, please.
Again, my name is Laura Sanchez. I serve as the Associate Dean for Institutional Research and Effectiveness at South Texas College. It has been in my role at the college for the past 18 years to work with coordinating board guidelines and specifically ensuring our compliance with all of our workforce programs and our academic programs with rules and regulations. So I want to go into the two findings of the report specifically. And again, we have two issues. One is related to the age of the students, and the other is related to not having charged tuition. Those are two separate issues, and I'll address them separately. The first finding is related to the age of the students, and the finding is that we did not meet the immediate employment aspects of rules for students younger than the age of 17. The justification for that finding is that continuing education funding is designed for continuing the education of adults and to provide job training for immediate employment. The finding is based on first Texas Education Code 130.003E4. That particular set of code states that continuing education programs are defined as continuing adult education programs for occupational or cultural upgrading. What I'd like to reference is that Texas Education Code 130.003 identifies 9 eligible activities for funding. E4 is one of the 9, continuing adult education. The other area that's eligible for funding that we believe is the type of funding that this program is eligible for is actually Section E9, which allows funding for workforce development programs designed to meet the local and statewide needs. This is a very specific designed workforce development program that was based on a very specific local need that we have in our area. So 130.003, while it does reference continuing adult education as eligible for funding, it also identifies 8 other types of activities that are eligible for funding, of which we believe ours falls under E9. The second piece of code, which is referenced, And the other justification is that workforce education as part of continuing education is designed to train adults after graduating from high school for immediate employment. And this is based on TAC 91 or 9.15. TAC 91.5 states, first let me reference that TAC 9.1 is a list of definitions. It's a list of definitions for types of programs and many other terms and terminology that's used throughout code. So let's be clear. First of all, it's a list of definitions. It defines workforce education programs, career and technical workforce programs, both credit and non-credit, as intended to prepare students for immediate employment or job upgrade. It defines the intent of the program. It does not specify the institutions have to ensure that students are eligible for immediate employment. Not only that, it doesn't specify what is defined as eligible for immediate employment as being age 18 or older. As we know in the state of Texas, you can be employed younger than the age of 18. And there are many other criteria that an individual would have to meet to be considered immediately employable. But the base understanding is this rule doesn't specify that we as an institution have to determine that a student is immediately employable in order to participate and be eligible for funding. There are other definitions in that same rule for academic programs that state that those are intended for an individual to be able to directly transfer to an upper level baccalaureate program. Well, if you apply the same logic to the academic programs, then that would mean institutions have to determine that every student who participates in an academic course is immediately transferable to an upper division baccalaureate program. Well, a sending institution can never guarantee that because the eligibility for transferability of a student is based on the receiving institution, not the sending institution. So that just goes to demonstrate that this particular code is really just defining the purpose of a program. It's not defining that an institution has to determine that a student is immediately employable to be eligible for funding. And not only that, it doesn't define immediate employability as an age. Beyond that, we did seek guidance from the coordinating board, and I think this is where it's important. The only document that we had available to us that indicated an interpretation from the coordinating board on the age of continuing ed students at the time was the FAQ document that was posted online. This was a heavily relied upon document in the field for a lot of information about continuing ed practice. It specifically stated that there was no minimum age for continuing education students. So that indicated to us the interpretation of the coordinating board at the time was that there is no minimum age for participation in continuing ed. Now that document was removed in 2014 from the coordinating board website, but it was removed with no communication from the coordinating board as to why it was removed or that the information in there was no longer valid. The second issue is the issue of zero tuition. So the finding in the report for zero tuition is that South Texas College did not meet the requirements of TEC 130.003 and TAC 21.4 to charge and collect tuition for continuing education contact hours reported. TEC 130.003 sets forth 6 criteria necessary for community and technical colleges to be eligible to collect state appropriations. One of those 6 criteria states that you must collect from each full-time and part-time student tuition in order to be eligible for funding. Full-time and part-time student definitions are definitions for credit students, not for non-credit students. So that particular set of rules requires you to charge tuition for credit students, not for non-credit students. In addition, TAC 21.4, which is also referenced as requiring the charging of tuition, states that you should charge tuition based upon the 20th class day of each regular semester and the 15th day of each summer session. Again, these are considered the census date for regular credit hour terms, not for continuing education terms. The census dates are different for those particular terms. And also 21.4 also allows for valid contracts to be considered as collected tuition and fees. And we did have valid contracts in place for the continuing education hours that we claimed for zero tuition. And finally, the final code that is referenced in the report is requiring the collection of tuition for continuing education hours is 54051B. This particular rule, or 54051N, and 51B says that tuition must be collected from students registering at the institution as prescribed in this section. That particular section has multiple definitions for different collection and rates of tuition, none of which reference continuing education. And the one that's referenced in our report is that tuition may not be less than $8 for each semester credit hour, or a total of no less than $25 per semester. Neither of those charges can be applied to a continuing education student. They don't register for semester credit hours, and they don't register on a per semester basis. That particular rule defines minimum tuition charges for credit hour students only. The reason I bring all this to your attention is to identify that the rules themselves are extremely unclear. In situations where the rules are unclear, we rely on the coordinating board to provide clarity to those rules. The FAQs in place at the time both said there was no minimum age for students in CE, and that zero tuition was allowable in situations where you had valid contracts in place. And our reported funding, reported activities for that time period met those definitions. There is reference in the report to change in guidance in the 2015 GIPWE. I do want to point out that those revisions in GIPWE only reference zero tuition. They don't reference age. But on the issue of zero tuition, they struck out the language that was in the FAQ that referenced the ability to charge zero tuition. However, the rules that are pointed to in GIPWE related to eligibility of funding are the same rules that I just referenced, that if you read them, only require charging tuition for credit hour programs. So when we reviewed the change in GIPWE 2015, we went to those exact rules that are referenced in GIPWE 2015 that did not indicate to us any change was required on our zero tuition funding activities that we were reporting for funding. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have regarding that.
Before Mr. Raven, we're trying to wrap this up, everything by, we still have to hear back from
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Martin by 5:30. So I need to ask the board, would you, and I think we're going to do an executive session. So do you want to go ahead and ask your question? But I think, and then what I'd like to know, do we want to call Mr. Pale back up to respond to any of this? Do we want to go into an executive session? What would you all like to do next after Mr. Raven's question? So go ahead.
I want to be clear, I'm understanding what you're saying. Is it your position that did you ever think it was continuing juvenile education?
We refer to it as continuing education. So when we were determining whether or not we could offer these programs in the high school, first we look at rules. Rules specify various conditions under which you can be eligible for funding, and one of them is workforce development programs that meet a local need. We feel this program is eligible for that type of funding. We did seek guidance from the coordinating board, and the coordinating board's FAQ at the time stated there is no minimum age for CE participation.
So it says, but the guideline says continuing adult education.
The guidelines in one section of rules state continuing adult education, and in another section of rules it references workforce development programs that are also eligible for funding. The rules don't state one takes precedence over the other. There are 9 different eligible activities listed in that rule. Some of them are also academic programs. It's a rule that lists it's 9 different eligible activities for funding for community colleges.
But do you ever see any language in the rules that reference continuing juvenile education?
No, but there's also nothing in specific in the rules that states that it's not allowable for those under 18. And the guidance at the time said there was no minimum age.
I think it's also important to bring up that for many of us, the thought of 9th graders going to college was really quite foreign. But we are living in a day and age where our legislature has made dual credit available to 9th graders. We may have been a little ahead of our time by trying to give these young people a head start on finding a basic job. So we never thought of it as juvenile continuing ed. We thought of it as non-credit, as an opportunity to help students that we didn't think would ever get out of high school.
And that's your position as to what that means when we talk about allowing ninth graders to go to college? We're not talking about exceptional students. We're talking about students who are socially, economically, geographically challenged, but they can go to college at the same time.
Currently, the dual credit opportunities for ninth graders applies to all ninth graders without regard to socioeconomic status.
That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
So I appreciate your goals and your aspirations to try to serve the needs of your community, but I have to say that I'm very disappointed in the presentation here. Clearly, a 41% dropout and failure means that those students are not ready for college-level material. The academic rigor is not college level. It's being taught by high school teachers in high schools. They're not going to college, they're going to high school. And I really have to say, regardless of what you thought the facts said or what the guidance said, clearly the statute says you can't do what you're doing and get funding for it. Would you agree with me now, as we interpret it together, that the statute says we as a coordinating board cannot offer further funding for what you're doing under the statute? We have an obligation to the legislature to uphold the statute. Do you agree with that going forward?
I respectfully have to disagree.
Okay, thank you. Next is, I really have to say, this, saying that a frequently asked question is guidance, pick up the phone. The commissioner's always available. The assistant deputy commissioners are always available. This is a large amount of money, a very large amount of money. And to be quite honest, I kind of side with where the auditors were. I think shame on you. You should have thought about this, and you should have said, we cannot possibly pull this thing over as being a higher ed. It's not higher ed. It's secondary ed. It's laudable. It's good for your community. I appreciate you doing it, but this is not the intention for these funds. And you're unique in this state right now.
I would like to add that perhaps it's time for a conversation as to whether continuing ed is part of higher ed and whether continuing ed is under the purview of the coordinating board for higher ed. I've heard several of you comment that this is not a college academic level course. It was never meant to be. Continuing ed is not college level academic courses. So I had proposed in the response that if the coordinating board is going to be responsible for continuing ed in this state, perhaps serious attention should be given to what is continuing ed, what are the guidelines, what are the rules, and then the institutions decide whether we participate in continuing ed or not. But we certainly defer to the wisdom of the coordinating board.
Chairman Jenkins.
I just had a clarification point. So the valid contract piece, is that with the school district, or who's that with? We kept referencing that.
We've had a variety of valid contracts. We do have contracts with the school districts to provide this course to ninth graders. The ninth grader may be 14, may be 15, may have just turned 13. We also have contracts with it's called the Lower Rio Grande Development Council, part of the Council of Governments, where they contracted with us to do peace officer training. We waived the tuition under the contractual arrangement, but we felt justified in requesting the state appropriations because we still had substantial other direct instructional cost.
So, and I'm just trying to make sure I have as clear an understanding as I can get. So those contracts, what did you pay for those contracts? I mean, how does that, was there a transfer of resources from South Texas College to the ISD or to the Rio Grande Development Organization? I mean,
it was, for example, in the school district, The contract provided that we would not charge the students tuition. We would provide certain services such as developing the curriculum, working with the high school faculty to deliver the curriculum. The intent of the contract was to specify the responsibilities of South Texas College and the responsibility of the school district, and the same applied to the contracts regarding law enforcement training.
Okay, just to clarify, so there was no money going from the school district to you?
No. Nor from us directly to the school district.
So, but the only money would be coming from the state to you?
The only source of funding for this program was the state appropriations that we requested.
Right, so you had no costs necessarily associated per student, or you said there were some overhead costs? Can you kind of break that down for me a little bit?
We did have the costs in the, for example, in the area of developing the curriculum. We provided professional development to the high school faculty.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that, please? I want to understand what your costs in the process were to put this on, and just have an understanding of what that is.
Well, let me...
We got a lot of money here, and so I want to understand, you know, what part of it y'all had in it from an economic cost standpoint.
Okay, we'll let Dean Aguirre respond.
Thank
The
you.
professional development at the onset entailed training the teachers, all the teachers at the high school. We went from one high school to the next, from one school district to the next, training them on the content of the continuing education course, how to teach, the proper pedagogy, the PowerPoints, the handouts, all the materials associated with that. That's what professional development is. And that's at the onset. Every school year we do that. And then what we do after that, we continue mentoring the teachers throughout the year, going into the classrooms and observing the teaching to make sure that it actually takes place, the teaching and the learning, and then the assessment of the
So
students.
what's the staff necessary to achieve that?
Coordinators.
How many?
Well, all the ones that I have within continuing education, we have about...
For this program specifically?
For this program, we have about 5 or 6 coordinators that go throughout all year long to the different school districts. And then we have the customer service technicians that actually do the registration of the students, the collection of all the documentation, including satisfaction surveys. So it's a combination of coordinators that actually go into the schools to make sure that the instruction is taking place as prescribed, and then all the documentation to validate that the training actually took place before the issuing or the issuance of the continuing education certificate.
All right, now remember, it's 4:50, and if we have an executive session, so Mr. Raven, go ahead.
Quick question, Mr. I just want to be clear about this. The students were being taught by high school students, correct? I mean, high school teachers, correct?
Correct.
These teachers are not employees of South Texas College, is that correct?
Correct.
And the money you received from the state of Texas went to you for the teaching of these students, correct?
Or the overhead costs associated, what I just explained, the development of the curriculum, the revamping of the curriculum on a year basis, and the professional development and the monitoring. That's what it's used.
Did South Texas College ever pay any school district for any of the teacher hours that were used to educate these young people?
No, sir.
So you kept the money, but the school district's manpower did all the educating?
Right, the instruction costs were absorbed by the school districts, and we absorbed the administration cost, the costs associated to administer the program.
Did you ever consider sending money to the school districts that did the work for the work that they provided to students in which you got financial benefit from it?
No, the cost, since all the costs were absorbed by and there was no extra work associated with it except the embedding of the continuing education courses into the high school elective courses, there was no need for that.
That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, if it's all right with you all, I'm going to say for Agenda Item 8, Executive Session, the committee will meet in closed meeting to deliberate the following matter. Pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.071, consultation with attorney, the Agency Operations Committee will meet in closed session to receive its attorney's advice on legal matters related to Agenda Item 7C. No other business of the committee will be discussed before we reconvene in open session, and the time is 4:53 p.m. Dr. Reed, thank you very much for coming before us, and we'll be coming back out into open session, perhaps acting on something, so you're welcome to stay and
Thank you
or
for
leave
the
as you
opportunity
choose.
to present our case.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. The executive session has concluded. No action was taken during the executive session. The time is 5:20 PM. The committee is now reconvened in regular session. And we're still on agenda item 7C, consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation to the committee relating to the final report and audit of formula funding at South Texas College. And do I have a motion?
I have a motion, Mr. Chairman. I move that we immediately cease all future funding of this program to South Texas College, and that we obtain recoupment of all funds previously rendered in error.
All right, so we have a motion by Dr. Tischer, a second by Mr. Raven. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Now we need to circle back to Mr. Martin, and that's agenda item, I believe it's 5D, consideration of adopting the staff recommendation to the committee relating to student loan program support services. Were you able to get the information from Mr. Raven?
I believe so, yes, sir. If I may, on the citations, we have issued, the Office of Attorney General, but for us, on our behalf, has issued 1,134 citations year-to-date at an average cost of $62 per citation. The fee does change per citation because it goes as low as $50 or as high as $95, I believe. Depending on the type, there's 24-hour service, up to 6 attempts, et cetera, and then lower costs for regular service. We have incurred approximately $70,000 year-to-date for this service. And in our request, because these are two different providers, we broke it out. If we need authority from the AOC for anything over $100,000. And the intent is that we don't break out contracts to avoid that approval by doing $99,000 and $99,000, et cetera, and really it should be $200,000 should have come before the committee. So I had it on our list to come before the committee. We had estimates from the OAG that of 175 in total. 175 would be split between the two. I had 350 in here as total because I had added those together. So in discussion with the Office of Attorney General and their collections unit, it would be 175 as the highest they would expect. That's on the high side. During the middle of the year, we wouldn't have to come back.
You okay with that?
Okay. Is there any other questions between that was yours? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
All right, so we've got a motion by Dr. Tischer, second by Mr. Raven. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. I think, let's see. Ms. Battles, I think we're all through, aren't we? Or-
We'd have one more, it's 7D.
One last item
Is that?
was 7D.
It's Weatherford College.
I thought you sort of covered that in a way, but do you still have a report on it?
Just a very brief mention to
All right,
bring you
go-
up to
go ahead.
date. 7D is an update on the Weatherford College audit and the actions thereafter. In April, AOC voted to accept the Weatherford College offer to repay $1.4 million in formula funding and to spread that out over a period of years to dilute the impact. Pursuant to that, a repayment plan was sent to Weatherford College, whereby future formula funding payments will be reduced over a 5-year period. The first payment reduction of $28,700 occurred in July 2016, and the last payment reduction will occur in 2021. That's my update.
Any questions? All right, now we're done. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All right, okay. We've got a motion by Mr. Raven, second by Dr. Farias. All in favor say aye. Any opposed? The meeting's adjourned.